And we begin tonight with Steve Gruel, who is Supervisor Ed Jew's, one of his attorneys. Steve was a federal prosecutor with the United States Attorney's Office in San Francisco from 1989 to 2005. In addition, served as Chief of Major Crime Section, and he was an acting Chief of Organized Crime Section. His law firm, of course, represents a couple of aspects of Ed Jew's situation. What I want to do, first of all, we're glad you're on the program. This is one of your first full interviews, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. I've had a couple of snippets here and there,
right, but they don't do justice to this situation.
No, they don't. It's a rather large, complicated story, and it cannot be fully told in a 15 seconds, sound bite.
But it has. They convicted him. He's convicted. The media has convicted him
in the courtroom of public opinion, obviously, and that's why one of the things that we've tried to do, Arthur, is take the whole case out of that forum and into where it should be, if that's what they want to do, into courtrooms, legal courtrooms, and not where it's one headline versus another headline and one press release versus another press release.
The arbiter in those situations, when one side can dominate the media, is that the media goes neutral. In other words, for every comment that's made by one person, there's an opposite comment. That's normal reporting, which the Chronicle's losing, which is why they're losing money. They have joined in this pile-on. Now, I'm not going to judge Ed Jew. We'll talk about that in a moment. I'm not going to judge what he did. The viewers know he's a good friend of mine, and I advised him, and he was on this program, the first interview he did when he was elected. Still, I do not understand all the story, but I do know this, that all these sharks, political sharks, are coming in for their bite.
They smell blood, don't they?
They do. How can you ever get a fair trial?
Well, maybe we won't. Maybe it would have to be moved out of this district or out of the county of San Francisco. That's certainly an option that could be explored if it even gets that far. Keep in mind there are essentially three fires that Ed is dealing with. We've got the federal matter that is still ongoing, but ominously quiet. Maybe that's a good sign.
They have not returned some items you wanted.
No, they haven't. I've talked and been in a dialogue with the U.S. Attorney's Office and with the FBI. I know how they work. I respect them. They're professionals. They're going through the paperwork that they've accumulated, piece by piece.
And you worked with them as in anti-gang and trials that you led.
And white-collar cases and things like that.
You've worked with the FBI.
Oh, yeah. I don't know these particular agents personally, but I know how they operate. I know I worked for Robert Mueller, the director of the FBI. So I know what mindset they have and how they deal with things in a very fair, logical fashion, and that's what's happening here.
Do you think it was a fair, logical action, or was it entrapment?
Well, we won't know yet, or don't know yet, but we may find out down the road. I quite frankly don't want to know, because if this case, quite frankly, with on the federal level, could die on the vine. One of the things I've thought about is that it's clear to me that there was a certain sting, if you will, that occurred here. And
were they wired?
I don't know that for a fact, but I believe they were. And
I'm going to keep doing this.
Okay, but I'll answer the question.
Yeah, but what do you think? Who originated the sting? How did it begin? Who was the one that I've heard rumors who might have originated it? But something happened to create a sting.
I don't know the answer to that question, and we will or will not find the answer to that. But here's what I find most interesting. Knowing how the U.S. Attorney's Office operates, knowing how the FBI operates, if indeed there were individuals wiretapped or wearing a wire of some sort and went inside Ed Jew's flower shop on the night of May 4th and had X amount of dollars with them, and indeed if they went in and said, here's the cash that you've been asking for, and Ed says something that's incriminating at that time, or says something that's even ambiguous but could be believed to be incriminating, frankly, once they walk out, the feds could walk right in and slap the cuffs on him. If there are tapes, could have been that convincing, that clear, and have that kind of clarity to lead anyone to believe that there was some sort of criminal action or criminal intent.
Do they normally do that right after, if they're listening in a van or something? Do they normally do the arrest immediately, or do they go back a week later?
it could be both. And let's take your scenario. A week later. Well, we had 2 weeks later, right?
Yeah.
The 18th is when the search takes place, or searches take place at the supervisor's office, at his home on 28th Avenue, and down in Burlingame, etc. And he's not arrested at that time. And that now, putting on my former prosecutorial hat, I look at that and I say, well, they must not have something. So now they're going to grab the paper, whatever paper exists to help support whatever theory they believe exists. Then the next step, a couple of days later, if you recall, the supervisor was going to go on a pre-planned trip to China. He wanted to stay. He wanted to keep talking to the press, which is natural. I think that's an instinctive reaction to explain your story, especially when you're being accused of wrongdoing. I told him, get out of town. I talked with the FBI beforehand, made sure that they didn't have a problem with that. I didn't hear back from somebody, the agents. I left messages. That tells me that there were no kettles burning at that time.
Or do you know whether or not Edu offered them a receipt and they refused it when they handed over the money?
I don't know that for a fact. I've heard that. Mm-hmm. And if that's true, now that tells me a lot of things as a former prosecutor, that if there was a sting going on, maybe it didn't go
the way they wanted it.
As scripted as they wanted it to be scripted.
Now, before we go to the other two fires,
yes,
and staying with this one, because I personally feel this way. The other one, I actually, from what all the information you've sent me, I think that you'll be successful with that.
This is a quo warranto?
The whole question of his living, his residency, this is more serious. Yes, and I also heard that a possible candidate for mayor may have been the instigator of the sting operation. In other words, Edu's made enemies because he's so independent. They saw that when he was a guest on this program, and I've known him for these years, that you cannot predict he doesn't sit on anyone's fence. He is Edu's man.
Good.
And he antagonized a lot of people, especially potential candidates for future office. We're afraid that he might actually become too successful, and that it's possible that one of those people did the sting, originated the sting with the FBI.
Well, let me just say that the FBI is not going to act on innuendo, is not going to act on rumor, it's not going to act on some sort of...
How about an elected official?
Standing alone? The answer to that is no. My guess would be that if there was any information that the FBI had, what they would do as professionals is essentially go to the source and say, what's the story here? What's going on here? They're not going to take hearsay, because you know what? Hearsay doesn't stand up in court.
But there was no crime at that point in their minds.
No, but they're not going to investigate a crime. They're not going to rely on the word of someone who is not, quote, the victim. So they're just not going to, they're going to take it one step further. They're required to do that as professionals and as investigators, and quite frankly, any federal prosecutor would not expect less than that.
Is it wrong for him to have taken money, even if he gave a receipt?
No. I mean, I don't think money is illegal yet. Was it naive and possibly stupid on his part? Without question.
Do you think you can prove that?
About being naive?
No, proving that it wasn't a crime.
I don't have to prove anything. I mean, the beauty, of course, of our system, Arthur, is any citizen is presumed innocent until proven guilty. So we know that's what happens in a courtroom, but we know in the city here.
What I meant is, based on what Ed Jew says happened, and he said happened, was there a crime there?
No.
Okay, so in other words, they're going to have to prove something more than the fact he just took the money and it wound up in his house, and some of it was going to go to a park, and so that they have to prove there's nothing wrong with that act as long as it's reported.
Right. That's right, and in fact we did that, and within the requisite time period, we reported the money that Ed had. He donated it in accordance with the instructions that he had.
Was that before the FBI entered the scene?
It was subsequent to the scene. But keep in mind, it's a 30-day window. So if I donate $10,000 to Arthur Bruzzone,
Right.
and you are an elected official,
Right.
you have 30 days to act on that donation. And frankly, the law is so ambiguous, you could take that, let's say, $10,000 and go to Reno.
Is that true?
Yeah, and, win, lose, or whatever. But as long as day 30 rolls around, you're reporting it and donating it in the fashion you were
You
instructed.
feel like you've done the proper reporting and he can't be held that he violated that. Are they contending that? Is the state or the DA or the city attorney or who is anyone contending that he did not report it properly?
Executive Director of the Ethics Commission. And that has opened up a can of worms, which I find most interesting.
Go ahead.
Because when I was quite...
What did the Ethics Commission president do?
She, Ms. Harriman, has instigated her own investigation into the Executive Director's actions. And let me explain very briefly what happened. We filed this form that's required by state law on behalf of the supervisor. The executive director, on his own, unilaterally said, you filed it in the wrong place. I'm rejecting it, which is, first of all, that's totally inappropriate given his responsibilities and roles. Second, I found that most interesting. And, he said, you have to file this with the clerk of the Board of Supervisors. And I said, all right, fine. Let me issue 2 sunshine requests, one to the Ethics Commission, and the second to the clerk for the Board of Supervisors. And from 2003 to the present, I asked for all such similar forms filed with the Ethics Commission. 22 such forms have been filed since 2003 by 4 different elected officials here in the city and county of San Francisco.
And the Ethics Commission accepted it.
Without question.
Okay, we may be losing the viewer just a little bit. What you're saying is that EDU has the right to take money as long as it's reported properly.
Yes.
Within a 30-day period. You went ahead and made the report, you sent it to the Ethics Commission. They refused to accept it.
He, the executive director,
said he can't accept it.
Can't accept it. You didn't do it right.
Did that put you over the 30 days? Or
it would, but we've got if you go on his theory. But we have ours. The form we filed is date stamped, and as far as I am concerned, we filed in accordance with the law.
I said that for me was the more difficult question I had for Ed, and the money part.
Yes.
The other part about residency, and we only have 1 minute left, but you have to prove that you intended to live in the district at the time that you filed for candidacy. All you have to prove is that he intended to, not that he did. Is that correct?
That's right. I mean, the law on residency or domicile for under the government code in an election law is about as loosey-goosey as you could imagine, clear as mud. And we believe in the application, our response that we have filed to City Attorney Herrera's office unequivocally shows that Supervisor Jew has his domicile indeed at 2450 28th Avenue.
And all of this is about no water going?
Unbelievably, I can't believe that's their theory. We have learned.
That's what Kamala Harris is trying to do, the district attorney. She's trying to prove she's got 6 felonies charged against him, including that he failed to.
Yes.
Okay. That has to do with water bills.
I think in the long run, what's going to be seen, Arthur, is that the supervisor has adhered to all aspects of the law. I would not be surprised to see quo warranto not granted by the Attorney General, or at least stayed. I mean, I'm very upset that they tried to, in my opinion, tried to trap the supervisor into this, feigned opportunity to discuss the situation when, in fact, in my opinion, it was a trap to get him to talk so that they could have the criminal charges.
And the whole thing is there's too many politicians floating around. These are the sharks that are in the water. He's some in Sacramento, some here in the Bay Area, all of them looking ahead, and they all piled on. That does not relieve Ed of any, let's say, not indiscretion, but poor judgment at this point. And I would tell him that if I had a chance to. You can tell him that. But on the other hand, I see a pile-on here.
It's a pile-on. And I think with the passage of time, we're going to throw the pile away.
Good. Steve Gruel, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome. Nice talking to you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.